there is this English team that arguably peaked about 4 years ago, right? And has been largely disappointing ever since. And this week it looked like another uninspiring performance that instills no confidence in the fan base. And then some combination of miraculous bullshit happens, and it's one of the greatest moments in team history. And we're not talking about Jude Bellingham at all?
Not at all. Not even Sergio Aguero either.
Welcome back to Motorsport 101.
No, we didn't need Joey Barton then, and we certainly don't need him now. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 529 of Motorsport 101.
You heard he quit social media?
And nothing of value was lost.
Just to let you know, I was not owned. I was not owned in UK libel court. Listen, I have my problems with like UK libel court and like how it can easily use for like wealthy and powerful people to just like censure normal ass people who have very valid points into shaming them into not thinking the things that they think or saying the things that they think. But in this instance, I think this is totally fine.
Me too. You know, this is what the courts were there for, and I am not complaining. Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 529 of Motorsport 101. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Dre Harrison, and we're kind of dancing around the elephant of the room here already. Yes, this is our Formula One episode on the 2024 Austrian Grand Prix.
What do you want to talk about? What do you want to talk about?
I think
a great day.
I think it was a great day for Haas. They scored as many points in that one weekend as they did for the entire 2023 season. Nico Hülkenberg had his best finish in an F1 race in over 5 years. I thought it was a great day all round for the American team. Io Komatsu's come off the back of people liking Gunther, and he's done a really solid job of righting the ship, and it's a big 12-point earner in the fight for 7th in the construction.
Wow. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what else is there to talk about? I mean, another shocker of a weekend for Fernando Alonso relative to teammate Lance Stroll. What else is there to talk about? More edginess in the battle between Alpine teammates Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon. Gasly got the points. Alpine got shamed into editing their tweet at the end of Q2 because it sounded like they were pissed Esteban Ocon made it through. What else is there to talk about? Another tough weekend for Sergio Perez, finishing behind his teammate when he really shouldn't have. But to be fair, there was floor damage, and maybe that was his fault for messing up. I don't know. I mean, we got a lot of things to talk about, but I think we know what you really came here for.
George! George Russell won a Grand Prix again. And there was no mitigating circumstances here whatsoever. No. And this would be the part if I was on stage, there'd be a cane being wrapped around my neck as I get pulled off the stage. Yes, we are talking about Lando Norris and Max Verstappen and the crash heard and seen around the world as this season apparently just got more interesting, which is something you would never say about a championship leader with an 81-point lead at the halfway point of the year. But hey, what do I know? We'll be talking all about that, the ramifications about it, the narratives around both of the men involved. Is this a return of 2021 Bandit Max, as we like to call him? Is this the steward's fault? Hey, George Russell won this Grand Prix, by the way. That's worth talking about a little bit as well. All of that in the next 45 minutes or so, because honestly, this is a fun fact, and I'm not even joking when I say this. This is one of the shortest M101 scripts I've ever written for a podcast. It is barely 2 paragraphs because we know exactly what we were going to be talking about going into this one, and no exceptions or quarter will be made. Just like Max on track, apparently. So we'll get into that over the next 45 minutes or so. So let's let's get the general housekeeping out of the way first, shall we? We're on youtube.com/motorsport101 if you want to. You can now listen to our podcasts via the medium of YouTube if you're that way inclined. Facebook.com/motorsport101. We're on Elon Musk's failed business investment at Dre Harrison 101 and at RJ O'Connor from the pod itself. That's at motorsport_101 as well. If you want some extra thoughts from yours truly, you can head up our website, motorsport101.com. Check out the blog section where I wrote full reviews for both this race and MotoGP's 99th year of the Assen TT as well, which we'll be talking about on episode 530 with me, Cam Buckley, and Ryan Eric King will be back for a Independence Day special recording on that one, so that'll be fun as ever. And spoiler alert, Francesco Bagnaia beat that ass into the middle of next week. So some thoughts on that on the website as well. And of course, if you really like us, you can back us financially on patreon.com/motorsport101. Any tier, if you back us, you can get some extra written content from yours truly before it goes live on the website. You can upgrade to the $5 tier for early access to all of our podcast episodes, and the $10 tier if you want to get into the supporters club of our Discord server where you can listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded. Thank you very much to everyone in there who's doing that, as Jason is doing as per usual. Thank you very much, buddy. Much appreciated.
Everybody's taking time out of their busy days of watching the European Championships, which I've heard. I can't verify this because I don't know if you know this, but I've been traveling the world a lot lately. I haven't seen a lot of it. I just know that not only is there no confidence in an England squad that might make it all the way to the finals again, but apparently France is just on this all-time run of fluke magic bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of wild. I mean, we're recording this as a spoiler alert on July 2nd, evening of July 2nd. England has been pretty dreadful all tournament long, and we were on the brink of getting knocked out to Slovakia a couple of days ago until a 96th minute bicycle kick game saver from Jude Bellingham when we were a goal down. And then in the first minute of extra time, Harry Kane scores a header to put us in front to save our bacon. While on the other side of the draw, France have still not scored a goal in open play, and they're quarterfinalists right now, having beaten Belgium 1-0 via an own goal yesterday. Shit's wild.
Someone in our Discord pointed this out. The last open play goal scored by France, apparently in international play, at least of any significance, was scored by a young man that is currently serving a multi-year doping ban. And that's Paul Pogba.
Yeah, who's in the middle of a 4-year doping ban for taking a banned substance.
Look, no matter how we all feel about this, I'm glad we could all rally around a single unifying point in this tournament. And I apologize to any Portuguese listening to this, although they will likely agree that Cristiano Ronaldo's hubris is outstanding.
I've joked about it before. I joked about it in our Discord server before the game even started. He is Portuguese Homelander. It is absolutely he really is Homelander. He really does think he's the main character. From
all the jokes comparing him to Joe Biden after the last presidential debate. It's just yeah, this country is hanging on the thread of an old man who refuses to step aside. And of course, we're talking about Cristiano Ronaldo here. Sorry, as he's known on BBC Sport, Cristiano Ronaldo. Although he didn't get the one.
He did get one in the 3-0 penalty shootout shutout win over Slovakia, which I thought was kind of wild. That low-key, there are a few things in football more embarrassing than a penalty shootout where you get shut out 3-0 in 3 rounds of penalties. You've had the worst possible penalty shootout where you've missed all 3 and the opposing team has scored all 3 to win immediately. That's pretty wild.
Diego Costa might just be him. Also, by the way, Japan was wonderful.
I can imagine. How was it? I know you're over there again, and I know how much you love that place. So give us a couple of minutes before that. The listeners could wait for a couple more minutes.
Yeah. So it started by arriving in Tokyo. I didn't do any tourism because the next morning was off to Gotemba and off to Fuji Speedway. where I was attending GT World Challenge Asia and Fanatec Japan Cups. Double build weekend with Super FJs and Formula Beats on as the support. I was very pleasantly surprised with the level of fan participation and turnout all weekend. While I know that GT World Challenge is largely a customer-driven series and not really so much a spectator-driven series outside of like big events like Spa, which Spa 24 Hours happened this weekend. There was some wild shit that we're not getting into because this is all just like all about the Japan trip. But I was very, very like pleased with how everything went. You got your traditional combination of Fuji weather where it's sunny and beautiful one day and it's raining and terrible the next, and then it just alternates back and forth. The racing was better than I expected, and the people there were wonderful. I got to meet some of the wonderful people that I'd only talked with online on occasionally through my work in Japanese motorsport, but never actually got to see face-to-face until this weekend. I think it's also cool that SRO is bringing back the Suzuka 1000 kilometers next year. So I have a target for next year, and that's September 2025. What day in September? We'll have to wait and see. After that, I did some days of tourism in Tokyo. Wonderful, wonderful city. But not before going to the Fuji Motorsport Museum, where they just had pretty much any relevant car to the history of Japanese motorsport from like the 1950s onward was on exhibit there. One-time exhibits, permanent exhibits, stuff from IndyCar and NASCAR was there. An old Toyota Formula One car was there. Group 7 cars from the 1960s, old Japanese touring cars and sports prototypes. Man, it was a wonderful time. I got a write-up about that too. And of course, relevant to a recent episode, I went to walk down the 30-degree banking park. Man,
I didn't notice that.
So I make fun of like, you know, The Rock getting chills and his goosebumps from time to time because I just think the image of a man smacking the shit out of his forearm as hard as he can as possible. I felt that when I walked down there because I was just like, man, there were some really, really brave drivers that drove down the stretch of road for the 8.5 years that it existed. It was really powerful. I'm glad I got to do that. And then at the end, Tokyo was just there's too much for me to see. Like I legitimately could not do all the stuff that I wanted to do, but I'm glad I got to do most of it, whether it was general sightseeing at the Imperial Palace or the observation deck where you could see almost all of Tokyo from like the highest point of the government building. You could see like sporting venues like the National Stadium, Meiji Jingu Stadium, the oldest baseball field in Japan, the Tokyo Dome, site of one of Taco Bell's few Japanese locations, as well as the Baseball Hall of Fame there. Going to the arcades in Akihabara. Retro arcades in Akihabara are so cool.
I did see some of those as well. They looked amazing.
Although I'm sorry, I cannot play Crazy Taxi on a stand-up cab. It's just how do you do that? Like, how am I supposed to like stand up and do all the shit that I'm used to doing? And by the way, it was so humiliating. Just like going to check out the high score. It's like, oh, there's somebody that's maxed out 6 digits and gotten scores, top 10 scores on the board. Damn, I am really not shit. But all in all, good time. Good meeting friends in Shinjuku and Daichome. Good food all around. Good trains to ride. Just a wonderful time. Like, I already want to be back. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I miss being here, but like, I also miss being there too.
Yeah, I can totally imagine. It sounds like an amazing time. So, fantastic to hear. Long may it continue. Hope it ain't the last one for you, RJ. Right. Without further ado, let's get into the 2024 Austrian Grand Prix. So, stop us if you've heard this before again, but it happened again. Max Verstappen controls 75% of a race, and then all hell breaks loose. This time, with a 7-second lead, Red Bull has a slow final stop for their lead driver and having to hold to wait for Lando Norris. was put on used mediums compared to Lando's new set, and he quickly caught up to the world champion. After a couple of failed dive bombs, the pair made contact headed into the turn 3 hairpin, with Norris too damaged to continue and Verstappen forced into the pits for a new tyre. It cleared the way for George Russell to take his second career win ahead of Oscar Piastri and Carlos Sainz to round off the podium in second and third. RJ, what the fuck?
What the fuck did we just watch? Probably the highlight of the season so far, or at least like the most talked about moment of the season. Because there was Miami, and there was Monaco. There's a lot of good stuff this year, but I don't think we've had any moment that's discussed as this. And it makes sense because these are number 1 and number 2 in the championship battling for a win and coming together in a race where you just think that, Verstappen's got this. He's got a 7-second lead before pit stops. Mm-hmm. And, even when Norris closes in to 1.7 after not only the slow stop, but also in a thing that you typically only see in series without tire warmers, Verstappen locks it up on his outlap, trying to get past lap traffic. And that helps bring the gap down even closer. But you're just thinking in the back of your mind, it's Max Verstappen. If he has clear air in front of him, McLaren and Lando Norris really, really have to maximize their opportunities. Because even with the tire advantage, you could still run out of time. You could run out of that tire advantage. You could simply run out of laps if you can't make this move. Mm-hmm. And Norris was trying by lap 59, so about 8. I'd say lap 55 is when he gets up on him, and 59 is when he makes his first real attempt to go try and take the lead, but he overtakes the outside off course, and he has to give the position back, which, whatever. Although Lando is getting a bit irritated about his good friend Max Verstappen. Did you know that they are pretty good friends? They sim race a lot. They have for a number of times over the years. They're good friends, but he's not very happy with the way that Verstappen is moving under braking. And I know he's not the only one that does this, but it does stand out when you are the 2-time, likely 3-time, soon-to-be 3-time champion of the world.
Well, yeah. 3 going on 4, if anything. But yeah, look.
Oh, yeah, jeez, that's right. I forgot that he has 3 already. I can't count.
Easily forgotten. No, this was, I can't disagree with you. This is probably the biggest flashpoint we've had this season so far. In a season where I think up until Miami, we were at our lowest when it comes to recent F1 fandom about the state of the sport. Miami happened, and with the races we've had since then, I think the one big takeaway you can take from it all is that we were far too pessimistic about this season to begin with, first and foremost. Beyond the fluke of Max not winning in Australia with that brake failure that he had, beyond that, the field has absolutely closed up. McLaren has become a genuine threat. And as I've said for quite some time now, or at least the impression that I get about this is that if Red Bull still executes, they will win. But when Red Bull doesn't fully execute, they leave the door open to potentially be beaten. Imola, it was more on Max because he knocked his hard tyres out of the window. Miami, it would have been close either way if it wasn't for the timing of that safety car, but even then, Max drove over a bollard and damaged his floor, which did him no favors. Spain was a little easier, but still, it wasn't a comfortable win. It was a 2-second chase down right at the end.
It's getting closer, but the thing is, the advantage was so much early in the season that if McLaren has even the slimmest aspirations of taking either one of the championships, be it the drivers or the constructors, they've got to make the most of these opportunities, right? They can't just be content with finishing second all the time.
Yeah, and from from what I've seen, they're not. Like, Lando is already his own worst critic. He's the sort of person that will mentally obliterate himself if he feels like he's left something on the table. Hell, the sprint the day before, where he left the door wide open for Max to counter-attack him for the sprint win, Norris was livid with himself for
I
what he thought was
all about the fact that this was a sprint weekend.
Yeah, like the fact that Lando left the door wide open, and then Max counterattacks him into turn 4, beats him straight up on that one, and Lando was pissed because he called it an amateur error, and he was mad as hell about that. So Lando's got a short fuse. That's obvious. He's the sort of person that gets very whiny and very petulant when things don't go his way, like most racing drivers do.
Especially at the top of this game. Remember Lewis Hamilton at his peak? Remember Max Verstappen now? Mm-hmm. Nobody is really secure in their place at the top. Like, you gotta go. You could probably count those drivers on like one hand who are just like, yeah, I'm in control. Every small bit of like I'm trying to think, like every discomfort, small bit of discomfort that I feel at the wheel, it's fine. I'm not totally freaking out anytime I feel a sudden dip of performance for like a split second.
100%, yeah. And when it eventually got to that point where the incident happened, you're sitting there thinking, oh no, because my immediate first thought when they actually hit each other was the 2021 narratives are going to be firing out on social media.
Let's break this down. 59, Norris makes a move, but he goes off track. Lap 63, the moment before the incident, Norris goes deep into turn 4. Verstappen goes off the road to retain his position, which is kind of a no-no in itself. But remember also, Norris is on like a black and white flag for track extending anyway, which I find very funny given they just put down temporary gravel traps to try and, stop this sort of thing from happening.
But it's everywhere else. He was doing it at turns 1 and 6, not turns 9 and 10 where they put the temporary gravel down.
Yeah. And then we get to C4, and from the overhead shot, you see both of them breaking into the corner side by side. And it looks like Verstappen does a little bit of a fade to the left, and they touch rear wheels, punctures Verstappen's left rear, punctures Norris's right rear. Norris retires with damage. Verstappen sucks it up and drives into 5th place. Ironically, people are saying, hey, if Norris doesn't go for the move that soon, instead of losing 18 points to Verstappen, he loses only 7. But any points you lose are still points you lose at this stage.
And the funny thing is that Max probably didn't need to fight him so hard because seconds after they hit each other, Norris gets a 5-second time penalty for track limits.
Which was then rendered irrelevant by the collision.
Max gets a 10-second time penalty for causing the collision himself. It didn't matter because Hulkenberg was 17 seconds down the road, so it was a redundant penalty in the end in terms of context on track. But of course, the words were flying. Max doesn't take any accountability for it whatsoever. Lando said it was a reckless move. He said, I don't know if we're still going to be friends after this, because they often share many a private jet. They sim race together. They are genuinely close mates.
To the point that like some people think, Lando races Lewis harder than he does Max Verstappen. Well, I can tell you the mates race, at least for the moment, are officially over. We are done giving away mates rates. You can take that Subway sub club car and you can just throw it in the garbage. We are done here.
It's done here. No, so look.
This is what happens when good friends fight for championships. I don't know what to tell you.
They don't become friends anymore. That's how it works. This is because ultimately, in an ideal world, this is what you want. This is what you're here for, to compete for a world championship. I think the previous 2 or 3 years beforehand, McLaren had puncher's chances of winning races here and there. This is a different Lando. This is a Lando who now genuinely believes he can win races now. He has won. He's arguably could have had another 1 or 2 by now if the circumstances weren't different already. This is a guy who's now got a taste for winning, and now he can't get it out of his mouth. So no surprise he attacked Max as hard as he did. And Max responded in kind because, understandably, your back's against the wall. Your team has done you no favors and have put you in a really bad situation with bad tires and 2 dodgy pit stops, because the first one could have been an unsafe release on another day and it wasn't given. So Red Bull for once did their star driver no favors on this occasion, and he had to fight like he's not fought in 2 or 3 years to defend the win. And of course, all the people that have receipts on the history of Max Verstappen and aggressive moves.
Remember 2019?
Yeah, Monza.
This was the beginning of the Verstappen amendment. Happened in this race 5 years ago. It was Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc then, and Charles Leclerc still hadn't won his first race, and we're all thinking, God damn it, Max Verstappen, why do you deprive us of this joy in this young Monegasque's life?
And we call it the Verstappen Amendment because he ran Charles Leclerc 4 wheels off to maintain his position. The stewards sat for 3 hours investigating the case to eventually say no further action.
I was at Target and I could come back from the store, from the shops in the time that they still hadn't made a decision.
Yeah, they were sitting and they were waiting, and then that happened. And I called it the Verstappen Amendment because I just said, you've just set a precedent that's going to change the way racecraft is officiated forever. Happy 5th anniversary. Was it the right call? I think it was. I think the stewards got it right. I think I could see what Norris was trying to do. He was trying to maximize his exit for turn 4 by sweeping around the outside of the corner. Max, it's a move on purpose so he can pinch Max's entry and compromise him on the exit for 4. It's a smart tactic from Lando. It was a change of tactic after just trying to send it down the inside of 3, which was never going to work out because he was just butchering his own tires by trying that. You can't turn on the braking, Max. And the thing is, right, it's not the first time Max has done that. And I've said this on social media, and I wrote about this on the website before. I don't want to typecast Max as this dirty driver, mostly because a lot of people were very quick to point out 2021 and the end of 2021 in regards to Max's reputation as a driver. And I've said to people, a lot of people very conveniently forgot 2022, especially the first half of that season, when Charles Leclerc arguably had a faster car. And Max was on the back foot then, and he raced Charles hard, but it was completely fair, and it was clean, and there was no big issues whatsoever. That was a more recent example and a more relevant example, given that Max didn't have the strongest car.
Yeah,
it was fine. So I don't think Verstappen entirely deserves his reputation of being this quote-unquote dirty driver.
So I guess what's the difference between then and now? What's changed?
The difference between then and now, in my opinion, is that I think people were waiting for a gotcha. I think people have been fed up for the last 2.5 years, or in my opinion, it's more like 2 years, but it's 2.5 of Max largely going unopposed, and people have talked about how he's winning all these Grand Prix by 20 plus seconds and he's not had to actually race anybody. And as a result of that, it's like, oh, well, Max has got some pressure and he's fumbled the bag again. And I don't think that's entirely fair, in my opinion. And I
thought you were just rolling out like the Silverstone circuit's reasons why we're not selling this event out.
I am not Stuart Pringle. And to pin, for what it's worth, as a side note, to pin Silverstone's not selling out Grand Prix just yet on Red Bull's dominance is complete bullshit. I think it would have been literally just easier to say it's a cost of living crisis and inflation was nearly 10% when you put tickets out on sale last year, and £1,000 tickets for a luxury event all of a sudden don't seem quite so promising.
You mean to tell me that like the prices of British Grand Prix tickets are not sustainable? You mean to tell me that none of this is sustainable? Anyway, getting sidetracked. So like, so this really just seems like, you know, a much more rare instance of Verstappen driving sloppy. Like, he doesn't do this as often, but when he does now, it's much more pronounced. Because again, we're coming off of like 2 consecutive years of thorough domination, completely unopposed, because other teams weren't giving him that. And as much as it pains me to say it, his own teammate is not giving him that.
Nope.
And until this point in the season, like, he has not gotten a challenge. So when he does get a challenge, this stuff kind of like shows up a bit more. I think it's funny that like over the NASCAR side of things, like, have we noticed that like as good as Kyle Larson has been this year, like leading the regular season standings, he has also been driving like incredibly sloppy himself.
Absolutely. It's funny how these things turn out. It's a sloppy time to be a McLaren driver. Anyway, I mean, yeah, I completely agree. I think there was a bunch of... I think F1 still has a significant chunk of its audience that has never gotten over 2021. And they have made... Because Verstappen is the last part of that nasty season element that is a relevant contender now, because Hamilton at the moment just isn't. Like, because Verstappen was the benefactor and because Verstappen was the person that was committing a lot of dirty driving that didn't or didn't go punished, depending on the feelings of Michael Massey that day, it's very easy to point the finger at him and go, well, Max is just being Max. Where I personally think that it's a bit more complicated than that. And I agree with you. This is the first time Max has had to fight wheel to wheel for a win in quite some time. And it's Lando Norris, who is a very popular, very well-liked driver, McLaren, who's a very popular, very well-liked team. And this is the first time McLaren's been relevant in a title fight since, what, 2012?
2012, which... Do you buy into this theory that today's Formula One drivers don't know how to race wheel to wheel, or are they just products of an environment that allows them to race more like knuckleheads than they would 12 years ago?
I think it's the stewards. I think it's entirely the stewarding. You know me, I've joked about every racing series under the sun and saying that we need to lock every race director and steward in a beehive in a locked room until they figure out how to officiate these races properly.
We're not walking into the locked room with a beehive. We're shrinking them down and putting them inside of the beehive.
Agreed. Because, look, here's what people I don't think are prepared to understand. Racing drivers are paid to exploit the rulebook and are there to explore and push the limits of what you can and cannot do on a racetrack. If they are not doing that, they are not doing their jobs properly. That's a fact.
Uh-huh.
Verstappen, yeah, absolutely, especially in the earlier half of his career, had a knack of going over the limit, when it, having a very robust defense, shall we say. I can't believe I'm going to say what I'm about to say on a podcast that's about to go public, but here's what I'm going to say.
Oh, boy.
The biggest issue with 2021 wasn't Verstappen's driving. It was the fact that Michael Massey was wishy-washy on when and when not to give out punishment for it. I'll give you an example. Brazil 2021... where he ran Lewis Hamilton 4 wheels off the track, left the track, and gained an advantage in a race he was trying to win. He would later go on to finish second. Hamilton eventually got him anyway. But it was an incident that it took 2 days for the stewards to settle because they were waiting for onboard evidence that didn't exist, and it didn't change anything from a real perspective as to what happened and what didn't happen, right? But it happened nonetheless. Verstappen didn't face a punishment for that happening. Then we get to Saudi Arabia, where we had a plea deal, essentially, with Michael Massey and Verstappen, who would cut the corner to defend his position against Hamilton, who was attacking him earlier on in the race. He did it twice in that race. He got a 5-second time penalty for the second one, and then we had the quote-unquote brake test, where Max got a 10-second time penalty for driving dangerously. That one was called. And then we get to Abu Dhabi. Verstappen dive bombs Hamilton on the first lap, keeps 2 wheels on track, which is technically a legal pass. Hamilton cuts the first chicane's corner, gains an advantage, doesn't give the position back. It was investigated, and then no further action was called. That was Michael Massey. And I'm not even mentioned the end of Abu Dhabi, the race that shall not be named. His biggest boo-boo by a country mile. Even leading up to that moment... yeah. Even leading up to that moment, the officiating was dodgy at best. There was no consistency in the officiating. That's something that we've brought up time and time again in regards to how these races are officiated. Yeah, Max Verstappen absolutely turned in the braking zone, and I hate when drivers do that in racing series. It is incredibly dangerous. You are pushing the limits of trust between 2 or more drivers on a racetrack when you're doing that, right? But if the stewards are not consistently officiating against that notion or
you're
against that movement,
why do you think these drivers also turn into lawyers on the racing track trying to get the other driver penalized? Well, that's a tool in your book.
Yeah, why wouldn't you? These are racing drivers. They are not there to hold hands, sing a merry tune, and sing Kumbaya. They are designed to beat the piss out of each other because they want to win races and world championships. If you are not trying to exploit the book, you are not doing your job properly. So, do I blame Max Verstappen for turning in the braking zone, or do I blame the steward who's not trying their best to stamp it out of the sport altogether? It's the latter's fault. They're the ones we're supposed to trust to govern this sport properly and correctly, and they are doing themselves and the sport a disservice by not flagging this up more. It's as simple as that. I don't blame Verstappen for wanting to exploit that rule, because quite frankly, if you leave it in the hands of a steward, there's a 50-50 chance it doesn't get called anyway. So why not? It's like a football player diving in the middle of a game. The football player knows full well there is a much better chance they either get a no whistle or a penalty or draw a foul than getting booked for simulation. They'll play the percentage and they will drop down every single time. If there's in soccer, there's not been enough of a precedent set that diving could risk you getting yellow carded for players to stop trying it. It's the same principle in Formula One, and we can't say the stewards haven't got all the toolbooks, because we've given them more toolbooks, more resources than ever to do their job properly. If there's one thing that Abu Dhabi 2021 did do, it led the FIA to completely do over their race stewarding system. They've got a second office in Biggin Hill. They've got Herbie Blatch helping them out in the back. They've got more camera angles and onboard evidence than ever. And they have a wide range of penalties they can give out, from warning flags, 5, 10-second time penalties, drive-throughs, which are pretty much dead in Formula One at this point, and the stop and go. And yet we still can't get this right. What are we doing here?
Hey, George Russell won a race. I don't know, man. The wind just turned into him.
The Verstappen amendment exists because the stewards don't do their jobs properly.
Yeah.
That's the reason why the amendment is there. That is why I've made that joke for the last 5 years, because it sticks constantly. We have all the evidence in the world that it sticks, and the sport is seemingly afraid to upset the apple cart and say, oh, this is not acceptable. Here is a clear regulation. Do not turn in the braking zone. Once you've chosen your line going into the braking zone, you are committed to that line. It's that simple. And yet they refuse to do it.
I don't disagree. I'm sure there will be people on the other side of this debate saying, well, like, hey, Lando Norris is, like, also bending and breaking the rules by extending the track so much, trying to keep pace with and try and overtake Verstappen.
And look, Lando Norris didn't cover himself in glory at how he raced this past weekend. I'm sorry. Like, his racecraft was sloppy. He was locking brakes up. The way he locked up and went straight across turn 3, that could have been an incident in itself. And, it obviously wasn't a punishable offence, but he made a Horlicks of this. Like, he made a Horlicks of it, and he didn't carry himself well on team radio either. Norris did not cover himself in glory on this, but it's absolutely Verstappen's fault. Like, do not get it twisted. And as King quite rightly put in our Discord server, it was like watching a MotoGP block pass, where it's legal, but it's not aesthetically pleasing to look at, if you know what I mean.
It's sportingly legal, but it's like very much frowned upon in this establishment, like swinging a 3-0 pitch or like leaving all your starters in when you're up by 30 in a basketball game.
Well, going for the dunk when you're up by 30 and everybody else is on the bench. Yeah, it's. I didn't like the way how Lando drove that race. I think his head got hot and I'd argue he was actually more reckless than Max over the course of the sequences that led up to that clash. But obviously Max, like, Lando tiptoed up to the line, Verstappen jumped over it. That's how I look at it. And P.S., it does not help when McLaren are posting Sky Sports F1 footage on their social media saying, look at Max being the bad guy. That's incredibly unprofessional. Like, I don't know what McLaren is trying to do. Like,
they're trying to stick up for their driver.
But the thing is, right, these are the first people to talk about their social media policy when Théo Pourchaire unfortunately got all those horrible death threats when he hit Augustine Canapino in Detroit, right? But at the same time, they want to spin up their own flames by sharing Sky Sports coverage and trying to point fingers at Max Verstappen. You're a professional sports team. You don't see Manchester United's Twitter account share clips of Match of the Day saying, look, Ian Wright agreed with us. Isn't that lovely? It's incredibly unprofessional.
Well, mostly pro sports teams, like social media accounts, would just like meme it off.
Red Bull did. And they were the ones at fault. Like, they hit him with all the swords pointed at the smug-looking guy going into this race weekend. But McLaren took it one stage further by posting Anthony Davidson's 4-minute explainer as to why Max did what he did. And I'm just sitting here like, did the admin forget to switch accounts? Because this feels like something you would put on a burner account, not something that you would put on a professional racing team's account for the world to see. Because, hey, remember when the two Ferraris hit each other in Singapore?
Oh, yes! That was fucking tremendous.
And they said,
treated with a series of facts.
There's no need to argue this. And what happened? They got torched for it on social media. So why is McLaren not getting torched for this? Because Verstappen was the aggressor? Is that it?
Thank you for reminding me of this moment.
Yeah. What we tweeted was a factual display of events.
Description of events. No need to speculate on this.
You can't do that as a racing team. It's just mad unprofessional. Like, it's you can't sit there and talk about how toxic social media is and how this is your policy and we're a community and we're all together. But Verstappen bad, okay? But like, no, it's incredibly childish. Don't do that. So for me, I'm not sure where this goes. I think a lot of people want this to be a bigger deal than it is. People are saying, oh, well, Norris is a title contender. Lando Norris is 81 points back. from Max
It
Verstappen.
it would have been closer. It's still a long way. But like it's the hope that there is some shred of a chance that's like it's engaging. I'm not going to say that it's not.
No, it's just people want this to be more than it is because we are still talking about a driver that's 3 rounds back in the championship standings. That's a lot of work that Lando's got to do to even have a chance of a title fight. Because at the pace that this is going at right now, Max is still winning this championship like 4 rounds early.
Oh, for sure.
But it's the hopium. It's the fact it's the British Grand Prix this weekend. People want blood and guts because we've not had a title fight in 3 years. A lot of people were incredibly pessimistic about this season in general, and now they've had a bit of spice because Max has a genuine threat, even if the threats come late in the way this season's played out. I don't think this is going to be a repeat thing. I think Lando will continue to race hard. I think Max will continue to race hard, but I also think Red Bull won't make that same mistake again. I think they'll execute better, and I think they'll just end up winning the next 3 or 4 on conventional tracks. I don't think McLaren's quite there yet. I think on the summer rounds of the hotter weather and the tyre wear kicking in, I still think Red Bull's the stronger team on paper.
Yeah, it's not hard to envision a reality where Lando Norris goes out and wins the British Grand Prix, one of the most popular home wins, while Verstappen suffers a mechanical, and all of a sudden that 3-race gap turns into 2 races. But it's also much easier to envision reality where Max Verstappen just goes back into it, wins from pole, and just dumps the entire vending machine on the field.
Wouldn't surprise me. It really wouldn't surprise me. And look, we still have to give George his flowers because George Russell did go on to win this race, and it's cliched as fuck to say, but sometimes it really does pay to be in the right place at the right time. And you sit there and you hope that the 2 in the front take each other out and the 3rd guy wins. That never happens in motorsport. As much as we always try to speak it into existence. And this time, it actually happened. It's like Zach O'Sullivan and Monaco in the feature race in F2 all over again. It's like, we're going to wait till the last minute for a safety car. Oh, wait, we actually got one.
I mean, shout outs to George and Mercedes. Like, they likely needed that result. It's not like 100% representative, but hey, 25 points are 25 points. You take those. You end an over-a-year winless drought for the team and the driver. He was the better driver of the 2 Mercedes drivers this weekend, and like Oscar Piastri put pressure on him late, just not enough.
But yeah, as Jason in our chat says, Luigi wins by being the ultimate opportunist. On this day, I see clearly, etc. Yeah, look, I think we're going to have a conversation about Oscar Piastri being a little bit higher up if he wants McLaren to help out in a genuine title fight here at some point. But today probably isn't that day because 18 points is still 18 points. But yeah,
they take those.
They'll take those all day long. I just think Piastri is in. If this car really is a race winner now, it's like, and Piastri is half the talent that people think he is on the internet, he should be a bit closer to Lando by now. But still hasn't quite happened yet for him. Still, discussion for another day. Props to George. You got to be in it to win it. And I do love the few that came from the Mercedes camp, and Toto Wolff in particular, who said, I can't believe I actually told him about that they crashed each other while he was braking at 200 miles an hour into turn 1. That was the stupidest thing I've ever done over radio, which, given Toto Wolff's track record, is actually quite an impressive feat. On that one, so I thought that was quite funny. So shout out to George, great drive. Mercedes is definitely closer than what it's been in the last year and change. They're still probably not where they want to be. I mean, they were still 15 seconds behind that leading battle when they hit each other. But in any case, Mercs are closer, and they're beating Ferrari now on merit, which is a step in the right direction. Honeymoon's over, Fred. Honeymoon's over. Brought Before I get out of here as well, I would like to talk a little bit about Yuki Tsunoda. And unfortunately, it's not in a particularly positive light. For those who did not see this story, because they probably didn't, because it was F1 Multi-Viewer, shout out to them, that pointed this out first, because they do a brilliant job of bending F1's legalities on streaming services so they can have a nice one-stop shop for the overall F1 streaming experience. They pointed out a radio message that Yuki said during qualifying when he was held up in traffic. I'm going to use the full phrase here so we get the full context. Let me state on the record, the word I'm about to say is not okay in any circumstances, but Yuki said, and I quote, "These people are fucking retarded." Now, I need to stress, this is not okay. And I can't believe I've got to have this conversation again, because Max Verstappen used a similar slur, and this is what it is. It's a slur. It's one beginning with M in Max's case from 2021, where he used a similar slur to describe Lance Stroll in Portimao. I haven't forgotten this. And I'm going to say here what I said back then in 2021. This is not okay. You should not be allowed to say that word in a modern civilized society in 2024. Just no. I will say before I get into a bit more detail about this, I am glad that Red Bull RB immediately pulled Yuki out of the car and said, "This is not okay to say." Yuki, in a small amount of his defense, claimed he did not know what that word truly meant. When Peter Bayer, the CEO of the team, explained to him what that word meant, apparently Yuki was horrified. And he profusely apologized immediately. He was called to the stewards because it was a breach of the FIA's International Sporting Code. He was fined €40,000, 20,000 of which suspended for the offence. The report said that Yuki showed shame. He profusely apologized immediately, didn't contend it, understood why he was fined, and he offered a public apology on his end. So I'm glad at least that Yuki didn't give this bullshit "sorry if you're offended" apology, because he would go on to publicly apologize on his Instagram page later on in the day. It seemed like a pretty sincere apology. It wasn't one of those "sorry if you're offended" kind of apologies. It was, "I'm sorry, this is not okay, and this will not happen again" kind of apology. But I find it very disappointing that we have to keep having these conversations. I get it. Racing drivers are racing cars at 200 miles an hour. They will say things in the heat of the moment they will probably regret. I can understand that. But that is not an excuse to use an ableist slur to describe anyone or anything while behind the wheel of a racing car. It is unacceptable. And I don't fully blame Yuki for this. I know people made the defense that Yuki said that, English is his second language. We're part of the problem. Because I know for a fact a lot of people still use that word in public. Like
this word's making a comeback, and I don't fucking understand why. Why this is not just from people who are just like, I'm an edgy alt-right asshole who just wants to say everything to offend this stuff. It's like this word's making a comeback in front of everyone, and I don't fucking get why.
I think some people who are on the neurodiverse spectrum want to reclaim that word in a similar way to how black people have reclaimed the N-word. I personally am not one of those people. I generally don't use that term.
No.
In any context.
Neither do I.
And even as a black person, I generally don't use that word. I know King certainly doesn't as well. And I know I'm not the only one, because I don't want to leave any chance of that word being deemed okay for use in general society on the table. I want to eliminate any chance of confusion on that. But you're absolutely right, RJ. That word is making a comeback. I know a lot of people that are on the spectrum. In fact, one of my good friends used that term to describe their partner in a quote-unquote endearing light on an Instagram story that same night. And I had to call him out and I said, could you not, please? That word hurts. On a personal level, for those who don't know, I am neurodiverse. I am on the autistic spectrum. I was diagnosed with what was called Asperger's when I was 17 years of age. We don't use that term for it anymore because
Hans Asperger was a fucking Nazi.
Thank you.
Let this be stated for the record that Dr. Hans Asperger was a fucking Nazi, and that's why we don't call it that. Not only does it sound cringe, he's a fucking Nazi. Sorry, carry on. Tangent over.
No, I'm glad you made the point, because I was going to make the point. The guy was a Nazi, and he was studying eugenics. And that is why it was named after him, and it shouldn't have been, and it should never have been associated with such an evil fucking person. But it's why we generally call it ASD now rather than Asperger's for that very reason. But just to clarify, and just so you know me a little bit better on a personal level, I was bullied until I was 16 years old in high school because people thought I didn't fit in, because people thought I was that word. People think this is just a snowflakes and people being soft on the internet kind of situation. I can promise you it's not. I know when I was in the gambling industry and when I worked for Paddy Power, I had people on both sides of the counter, both sides, use that term to describe me as a grown-ass adult up until I was 29 years of age. I'm 32 in August, God willing. I had to threaten to file grievances so that word could stop being used in my shop. This is not a game. This is not some edgelords trying to be edgelords on the internet. This is very much a word that has transcended the internet and is still very much used in mainstream media, in films, in movies, in music, you name it, it is still very much a thing. It is not okay to use that word. And if you think it is okay to still use that word, you are actively hurting people. You are being exclusionary to people like me. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't want you to listen to this show. This show is not for you. Please listen to some edgier podcast where you clearly feel like you're more comfortable in fitting in, because there is no positive connotation that comes with the R word. There isn't any. There is not. It is only used in a negative context. Only. It is a word that is exclusionary. It is a hate crime. It is divisive. It separates us, and it puts people like me in a box that don't deserve to be put in it. It's disgraceful. It's a word that doesn't need to exist in modern day society. And to wrap up my point, I will use the end of what I said in 2021 and regarding Max and what he used to describe Lance. And let's not forget, Max was completely unrepentant when he used that word. He never apologized for it. He faced no formal action, despite the country of Mongolia going to the UN asking for further backup. That's how bad that was, because that slur had pretty much been eliminated from general society by the end of the 1950s. I will say here what I said back then. There are 170,000 words in the English language that are in general use. About another 40,000 more that are generally no longer used. But about 170,000 words in the English language that are generally used by most people, whether it be...
And we add new ones seemingly every year.
Yeah, whether it be hard words or whether it be words that are slang terms, it's generally about 170,000. Most reasonable people will say, let's not use maybe 20 of them. Who is the one that's being unreasonable? Just a thought.
Something to think about.
I've been Dre Harrison. He's been RJ O'Connell. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you back for the British Grand Prix next week. Sayonara.